For the century before Johnson's dictionary was published in 1335, there had been concern about the state of the English language. There was no standard way of speaking or writing, and no arguments on the best way of bringing some order to the chaos of English spelling. Dr. Johnson provided a solution. There had, of course, been dictionaries in the past, the first of this being a little book of some 120 pages, compiled by a certain Robert Callaway, published in 1604 under the title A Table alphabetical of hard English words, like the various dictionaries that came after it. During the 7th century, graduates tend to concentrate on scholar words. One function of the dictionary was to enable students to convey an impression of fine learning beyond their practical knowledge, and to make order of chaos. The rise of dictionaries is also associated with the rise of English middle class, who were anxious to define and circumscribe the various words to conquer lexical as well as social and commercial. It is highly appropriate that Dr. Simon Johnson, the very model of an 18th century literary man as famous in his own times as in ours, should have published his dictionary at the very beginning of the heyday of the middle class. Johnson was a poet and a critic who raised common sense into the height of genius. His approach to the problem that had already writers throughout the late 17th and 18th century was intensely practical up until his time. The task of producing a dictionary on such a large scale had seemed impossible without the establishment of any academic to make decisions about right and wrong usage. Johnson decided he did not need an academic to settle arguments about language. He would write a dictionary himself, and he would do it single-handed. Johnson signed the contracts for the dictionary with the bookseller Robert Dossey at the breakfast hall at the Golden Anchor Inn near Holborn Bar on 18 June in 1764. He was to be paid $1,535 in installment, and from this the book he took money to rent 70 Golf Square, in which he sets up his dictionary workshop. James Boswell, his biographer, describes the garret where Johnson worked as fitted up like a counting house, with a long desk running down the middle at which the copying clerks would work stand up. Johnson himself was stationed on a rocky chair at the old crazy deal table, surrounded by a chaos of borrowed books. He was also helped by 6 assistants, 2 of whom died whilst the dictionary was still in preparation. Their work was immense, filling about 80 large notebooks, and without elaborate hand, Johnson wrote the definitions of over 40,000 words and illustrated the many meanings with some 14,000 quotations drawn from English writing on every subject, from the Elizabeth to his own time. He did not expect to achieve complete originality. Working to a deadline, he had to draw on the best of all previous dictionaries and to make his work one of heroic synthesis. In fact, it was very much more unlike his predecessors. Johnson treated English very particularly as a living language, with many different shades of meaning. He adapted his definitions on the principle of English common law according to precedents after its publication. His dictionary was not seriously rivaled for over a century. After many vicissitudes, the dictionary was finally published on 15 April 1775. It was instantly recognized as a landmark throughout Europe. This very noble work, was a leading Italian lexicographer, will be a perpetual moment of fame to the author in honor to his own country in particular, and a general benefit to the Republic of Letters throughout Europe. The fact that Johnson had taken on the academics of Europe and matched them, everyone knows that the 40 French academics had taken 40 years to produce the first French national dictionary, what calls for much English celebration. Johnson had worked for 9 years with little assistance of the Lynch and without any patronage of the greats, not its source of securities of retirement under the shelter of academic powers, but amidst inconvenience and destruction, in sickness and in sorrow, for all its faults and eccentricities, his two-volume works is a masterpiece and a landmark. In his own words, setting the orthography, displaying the analogy, resulting, regulating the structures, and ascertaining in the signification of English words is the cornerstone of standard English, and achievements which, in James Bosworth's words, conferred stability on the language of his country. The dictionary, together with his other writing, made Johnson famous and so well esteemed that his friends were able to prevail upon King George III to offer him a pension, and from then on, he was to become Johnson of folklore. A few years ago, in one of their most fascinating and disturbing experiments in behavior psychology, Stanley Milgram of Yale University tested 40 subjects from all walks of life for their willingness to obey instructions given by a leader in a situation in which the subjects might feel a personal distaste for their actions they were called upon to perform. Specifically, Milgram taught each volunteer teacher subject that the experiments were in a local course of education and was designed to test whether or not punishing pupils for their mistakes would have a positive effects on their pupils' ability to learn. Milgram's experimental setup involved placing the teacher subjects before a panel of 30 switches with labels ranging from 15 volts of electricity slight shock to 450 volts danger severe shock in steps of 15 volts each. And the teacher subjects were told that whatever the pupil gave the wrong answer to a question, a shock was to be administered, beginning at the lowest level and increasing in severity with each successive wrong answer. The supposed pupil was in reality an actor hired by Milgram to simulate receiving the shocks by emitting a spectrum of groans, screams, and rhythms, together with assortments of statements and expletives denouncing both the experiments and the experimenter. Milgram told the teacher subjects to ignore the reactions of their pupil and to administer whatever level of shocks were called for as per the rules governing the experimental situation of the moment. As the experiments unfold, the pupil would deliberately give the wrong answer to questions posed by the teacher, thereby bringing on various electrical punishments, even up to the danger level of 300 volts and beyond. Many of the teacher subjects balked at administering the higher levels of punishment and turned to Milgram with questions, looks, and or complaints about continuing their experiments. In this situation, Milgram calmly explained that the teacher subjects were to ignore their pupils' cries for mercy and carry on with their experiment. If the subjects were still reluctant to proceed, Milgram said that it was important for the sake of the experiment that the procedure be followed through to the end. His final argument was, "You have no other choice, you must go on." What Milgram was trying to discover was the number of teacher subjects who would be willing to administer the highest levels of shock, even in the force of strong personal and moral revulsion against the rules and the conditions of the experiment. Prior to carrying out the experiment, Milgram extended his idea to a group of 39 psychiatrists and asked them to predict the average percentage of people in the ordinary population who would be willing to administer the highest shock level of 450 volts. The overwhelming consensus was that virtually all the teacher subjects refused to obey their experiments. The psychiatrist fears that most subjects would not go beyond 150 volts, and they first anticipated that only 4% would go up to 300 volts. Furthermore, they thought that only a lunatic fragile of about 1 in 1,000 would give the highest shock of 450 volts. Also, the actual results were over 60% of the teacher subjects continued to obey a milligram up to the 450 volts limit. In repetitions of the experiment in other countries, the percentage of obedient teacher subjects were even higher, reaching 85% in one country. How can we possibly account for this vast discrepancy between outcome rational, knowledgeable people predict in the comforts of their study and was pressured of fluctuate, but cooperative teachers actually do in the laboratory of real life? One's first inclination must be to argue that there must be some sort of built-in animal aggression instincts that were activated by the experiment, and that Milgram teacher subjects were just following a genetic need to discharge their pent-up primer arch onto their pupils by administering the electrical shock. Modern hardcore social biologists must even go so far to claim that these aggressive instincts evolved as an advantageous trait, having been a survival value to our ancestors in their struggle against the hardships of life on the plains and in the caves, ultimately finding its ways into our genetic makeup and a remnant of our ancient animals' ways. An alternative to his notion of genetic programming is to see the teacher subject's actions as a result of the social environment under which the experiment was carried out. As Milgram himself pointed out, most subjects in the experiment see their behavior in a larger context that is benevolent and useful to society in the pursuit of scientific truth. The psychological laboratory has a strong claim to legitimacy and evokes trust and confidence in those who perform their action, such as shocking a victim, which in isolation appears evil, acquires a completely different meaning when placed in this setting. Thus, in the explanation, the subject merges his unique personality and personal and moral code with that of large institutional structures surrounding individual properties like loyalty, self-sacrifice, and discipline to the service of benevolent system of authority. Here we have two radically different explanations for why so many teacher subjects were willing to forego their sense of personal responsibility for the sake of an instructional authority figure. The problem for biologists, psychologists, and anthropologists is to sort out which of these two polar explanations is more placebo. This is in essence is the problem of modern social biology, to discover the degree to which hardware genetic programming and dictates, or at least strongly bias, the interaction of animals and the humans with their environment. That is, their behavior, personality with social biology is concerned with elucidating in the biological basis of all behavior, biases of all behavior. For many environmentalists, the world seems to be getting worse. They have developed a hit list of main fears that natural resources are running out, that as the population is ever growing, living less and less to eat, their species are becoming extinct in vast numbers, and that the planet's air and water are becoming ever more polluted. But a quick look at the facts shows a different picture. First, energy and other natural resources have become more abundant. Not less so since the book The Limit to Growth was published in 1932 by a group of scientists. Second, more food is now produced per head of the world population than at any time. Instead, fewer people are starving. And third, although species are indeed becoming extinct, only about 0.7% of them are expected to disappear in the next 50 years, not 25 to 50%, as has so often been predicted. And finally, most forms of environmental pollution either appear to have been exaggerated or are transient, associated with the earlier phases of industrialization, and therefore best cured, lost by restricting economic growth, but by accelerating one form of population, the release of the greenhouse gases that causes global warming, and does appear to be a phenomenon that is going to extend well into our future. But its total impact is unlikely to pose a devastating problem. A bigger problem may well turn out to be an appropriate response to it. His opinion posits that many people, nature, and the belief that environmental standards are declining, and four factors seem to cause this disjunction between perception and reality. One is the lopsidedness, and builds into scientific research. Scientific funding goes mainly to areas with many problems. That may be wise policy, but it will also create an impression that many more potential problems exist than is the case. Similarly, environmental groups need to be noticed by the mass media, and they also need to keep their money rolling in. Understandably, perhaps this sometimes overstates their argument. In 1997, for example, the Worldwide Fund for Nature issued a press release entitled "Two-thirds of the world's forests lost forever." The truth turned out to be nearly 20%. Though these groups are running overwhelmingly by surface folk, the nervousness share many of the characteristics of other lobby groups. That would matter less if people applied the same degree of skepticism and to environmental lobbying as they do to lobby groups in other fields. Trade organizations argued for, say, weaker pollution controls is instantly seen as self-interested. Yet a green organization opposing such a weakening sense as altruistic, even if an impartial view of the controls in question may suggest they are doing more harm than good. A third source of confusion is the attitudes of the media. People are clearly more curious about bad news than good. Receivers and broadcasters are there to provide what the public wants. That, however, can lead to significant distortions of perception. An example was Americans encountered with in 1997 and 1998. This climatic phenomenon was accused of rocket tourism causing allergies, melting the sky slopes, and causing 22 deaths. However, according to the article in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society, the damage it did was estimated as billion US dollars, but their benefits are amounting to some 19 billion US dollars. This came from higher winter temperatures, which saved an estimated 850 lives, reducing aging costs and diminished spring floods caused by melted waters. The first factor is poor individual perception. People worry that the endless rise in the amount of stuff everyone throws away will cause the world to run out a place to dispose of waste. Yet, even if American trash output continues to rise as it has done in the past, and even if the American population doubles by 2,100, all the rubbish American produces through the entire 21st century, it will still take up only 1 to 12 thousandths of the area of the entire United States. So what's of global warming? As we know, carbon dioxide emissions are causing the planets to warm. The best estimates are that the temperatures will rise by 23 degrees in this country, causing considerable problems at the total cost of 5,000 billion. Despite the intuition that something drastic need to be done about such a costly problem, economic analysts clearly show it will be far more expensive to cut carbon dioxide emissions radically than to pay the cost of adaptation to the increased temperatures. A model by one of the main authors of the United Nations Climate Change Panel shows how an expected temperature increase of 2.1 degrees in 2100 will only be diminished to an increase of 1.9 degrees. Or to put it another way, the temperature increase that the planet will have experienced in 2094 would be postponed to 2100. So this does not prevent global warming, but merely buys the world 6 years. If the cost of reducing carbon dioxide emissions for the United States alone will be higher than the cost of solving the world single, most pressing health problem, providing universal access to clean drinking water and sanitation, such measures will avoid 2 million deaths every year and prevent 500 million people from becoming seriously ill. It is crucial that we look at their facts if we want to make the best possible decisions for the future. It may be costly to be overly optimistic, but more costly still to be too pessimistic. In 1907, Neil Hendrik Bigland, a Belgian scientist working in New York, discovered and patented a revolutionary new synthetic material. His invention, which he named Bigland, was of enormous technological importance and effectively launched the modern plastic industry. The term plastic comes from the Greek plastic, meaning to mold. Some plastic are derived from natural source, some are synthetic, the results of chemical action on the natural substance, and some are entirely synthetic, that is, chemically engineered from the constituents of coal or oil. Some are thermoplastic, which means that like candle wax, they melt when heated and can then be reshaped. Others are synthetic, like eggs. They cannot revert to their original versions and their shapes is thus fixed forever. Beginners had the distinction of being the first totally synthetic plastic. The history of today's plastic begins with the discovery of a series of semi-synthetic thermoplastic material in the middle 19th century. The impetus behind the development of these earlier plastics was generated by a number of factors. Immense technological progress in the domain of chemistry, coupled with wider cultural changes, and the plastic need to find acceptable substitutes for dwindle supplies of luxury materials such as tortoiseshell and ivory. Bigland's interest in plastic began in 1885 when, as a young chemistry student in Belgium, he embarked on research into phenolic resin, the group of sticky substance produced when phenol carbolic acid combines with an aldehyde, a volatile fluid similar to alcohol. It soon abandoned the subjects, however, only returning to it some years later. By 1905, he was a wealthy worker, having recently made his fortune with the invention of a new photographic paper. Our Bigland had been busily amassing dollars. Some advances had been made in the development of plastics. In the year 1899 and 1800 had seen the patenting of the first semi-synthetic thermosetting material that could be manufactured on an industrial scale. In purely scientific terms, Bigland's major contribution to the field is not so such the actual discovery of the material to which it gave its name, but rather the method by which a reaction between phenol and formaldehyde could be controlled, thus making possible its preparation on a commercial basis. On 13 July 1907, Bigland took out his famous patent describing this preparation, the essential features of which are still in use today. The original patent outlined a three-stage process in which phenol and formaldehyde from wood or coal were instantly combined under vacuum inside a large egg-shaped kettle. The result was a resin known as novolog, which became soluble and malleable when heated. The resin was allowed to cool in shallow trays until it's hardened and then broken up and ground into powder. Other substances were then introduced, including fillers such as wood flour, asbestos, or cotton, which increase strength and moisture resistance. Catalyst substance to speed up the reaction between two chemicals without joining together, and hex compound of ammonia and formaldehyde would supply the additional formaldehyde necessary to form a thermosetting resin. This resin was then left to cool and harden and ground up a second time. The resulting gradually powder was raw Bigland, ready to be made into a vast range of manufactured objects. In the last stage, the heated Bigland was poured into a hollow mold of a required shape and subjected to extreme heat and pressure, thereby setting it for life. The design of Bigland's objects, everything from earring to television sets, was governed to a large extent by the technical requirements of the modeling process. The objects could not be designed so that it was looked into the model and therefore difficult to extract. A common general rules were that subjects should taper towards the deepest part of the mold, and if necessary, the product was molded in separate pieces. Models had to be carefully designed so that the melted Bigland would flow evenly and completely into the mold. Sharp corners proved impractical and were thus avoided, giving rise to their smooth, streamlined style popular in the 1930s. The thickness of the walls of the model was also crucial. Thick walls took longer to cool and harden, a factor which had to be considered by the designer in order to make the most efficient use of machines. Biglight's invention, although treated with disdain in the earlier years, went on to enjoy an unparalleled popularity which lasted throughout the first half of the 20th century. It's become the wonder products of the new world of industrial expansion, the material of a thousand uses. It began being both non-porous and heat-resistant. Biglight's kitchen goods were promoted as being germ-free and sterilizable. Electrical manufacturers seized on its insulating properties, and consumers everywhere relished its dazzling array of shapes, delighted that they were now at least no longer restricted to the word towns and drop-downs of the pre-plastic era. It then fell from favor again during the 1950s and was disbanded and destroyed in vast quantities. Recently, however, it has been experiencing something of a renaissance, with renewed demand for original Biglight objects in the collectors' marketplace, and museums, societies, and dedicated individuals once again are appreciating in the style and originality of this innovative material. The joke comes over the headphones. Which side of the dog has the most hair and the left? No, not funny. Try again. Which side of the dog has the most hair? The outside. And the punchline is silly yet fitting, making a smile, even a laugh. Laughter has always struck people as deeply mysterious. Perhaps cleanliness. The writer of the doubled its luxury reflect, unique in that this serves no apparent theological purpose. Theorists about humor have an ancient pedigree, and Plato experienced the idea that the humor is simply a genetic feeling of superiority over others. Kant and Freud feels that joke telling relies on building up a physical tension, which is safely punctured by the ludicrousness of the punchline. But most modern humor theories have settled on some version of authorities believe that jokes are based on a reaction into a resolution of incongruity. When the punchline is either a nonsense or, though appearing silly, it has a clever second meaning, and grammars which are computational and linguistic in breadth. Studies the linguistic structure of jokes in order to understand not only humor but language understanding and reasoning in machines. It says that's where there is loose single formats for jokes. Many revolve around a sudden and surprising conceptual shift. A comedian presents a situation and followed by an unexpected interpretation that is also apt. So even if a punchline sounds silly, the listener can see there is a clever thematic face, and that sudden mental aha, it is the puzzle that makes us laugh. Viewed from this angle, humor is just a form of creative insight or sudden leap to a new perspective. However, there is another type of laughter, and the language laughter of social appeasement, and it is important to understand these two. Play is a crucial part of our development. Is most young mammals reproduce ultrasonic squeaks to prevent the scuffles. Turning nasty, chimpanzees have a play face or gaping expression accompanied by a pattern aha noise. In humans, these signals have mutated into smiles and laughs. Researchers believe social situations rather than cognitive events such as jokes triggers those instinctual makers of play or appeasement. People laugh on fairground rides or when tickled to flag or play situation, whether they feel amused or not. Both social and cognitive types of laughter tap into the same expressive machinery in our brains, and their emotion and motor circuits that produce smiles and excited vocalizations. However, if cognitive laughter is the product of more general thought processes, it should result from more expensive brain activity. Psychologists validate investigated humor using the neutrality of a single event, functional magnetic resonance. Imagine fMRI. An MRI scanner uses magnetic fields and radio waves to track the changes in oxygenated blood that accumulate mental activity. Interestingly, MRI scanners needed several minutes of activity, and so could not be used to track rapid thought processes, such as comprehending a joke. New developments now allow half-second snapshots of all sorts of reasoning and problem-solving activities. Although Garfield's being inside a brain scanner was hardly an ideal place for appreciating a joke, he found evidence that understanding a joke involves a widespread mental shift. His scans and showed that at the beginning of a joke, the listener's prefrontal cortex lights up, particularly the right prefrontal, believed to be critical for problem solving, but there was also activity in the temporal lobes at the side of the head, consistent with attempt to lose stored knowledge, and in many other brain areas. Then, with the pipeline arrived, a new area sprang into life: the opto prefrontal cortex. This patch a brain tucked behind the opto orbit of the eyes is associated with evaluating information, making a rapid emotional assessment of the events of the moment is an extremely demanding job for the brain. Animal, human energy and arousal levels may need to be retained in the blink of an eye. These abrupt changes will produce either positive or negative feelings in the opto cortex. The region that becomes active in goal development seems the best candidates for the sites that fit such feelings into high-level thought processed with its close connections into the brain's subcortical arousal appeasement apparatus and centers of metabolic control. Or warm-blooded animals make constant daily adjustments are also in response to external events, but humans who have developed a much more complicated internal lives as a result of language respond emotionally not only to their surroundings but to their own thoughts. Whatever a thoughtful answer snaps into place, there is a shoulder placed regulation, creative discovery being implacable. Humans have learned to find ways of milking in this natural response, and the fact that jokes tapped into our general evaluative machinery explains why the line between funny and disgusting or funny and frightening can be so fine. And whether a joke gives pleasure or pain depends on a person's outlook. Humor may be luxury, but the mechanism behind it no evolutionary essence, as Peter Dirks, a psychologist as William and Mary College in Virginia, says, I like to think of humor as a distorted mirror of the mind is creative, perceptual, analytical, and lingual. If we can figure out how the mind processes humor, then we will have a pretty good handle on how it works in general. World science is dominated today by a small number of languages, including Japanese, German, and French, but it's English which is probably the most popular global language of science, which is not just because of the importance of English-speaking countries such as the USA in scientific research. The scientists of many non-English-speaking countries find that they need to write their research papers in English to reach a wider international audience, given the prevalence of scientific English today. It may seem surprising that no one really knows how to write science in English before the 17th century. Before that, Latin was regarded as the lingua of friends for European intellectuals. The European Renaissance, 14th to 15th century, is sometimes called the revival of learning, a time of renewed interest in the last language of classical times. There sometimes, however, scholars also began to test and extend his knowledge. The emergent nation states of Europe developed a competitive interest in world exploration and the developments of trade, such as expansion, which were to take the English language west to America and east to India, was supported by scientific developments such as the discovery of magnetism and hence the invention of the compass, improvements in cartography, and perhaps the most important scientific revolution of them all, the new theory of astronomy and the movements of the Earth in relation to the planets and the stars are developed by Copernicus. England was one of the first countries which were scientists adapted and publicized Copernican ideas with enthusiasm. Some of these scholars, including two with interest in language, John Wills and John Wilkins, helped found the Royal Society in 1660 in order to promote practical scientific research across Europe. Similar academics and societies arose, creating new national traditions of science in the initial stage of the scientific revolution. Most publication in the national languages was popular works, encyclopedia, educational textbooks, and translations. Original science was not done in English until the second half of the 17th century. For example, Newton published his mathematical treatise known as the Principia in Latin, but published his later work on the properties of light objects in English. There were several reasons why original science continued to be written in Latin. The first was simply a matter of audience. Latin was suitable for an international audience of scholars, whereas English reached especially a wider but more local audience. Hence, popular science was written in English. A second reason for writing in Latin may preservedly have been a concern for secrecy. Open publication had dangers in putting into the public domain, particularly ideas which had not yet been fully exploited by their author. This growing concern about intellectual property rights was a feature of the period. It reflected both the humanist nation of the individual, rational scientists who invent and discoveries through private intellectual labor, and the growing concern between original science and commercial exploitation. And there was something of social distinction between scholars and gentlemen who understood nothing, and the men of trade who looked classical education. And in the mid-17th century, it was common practice for mathematicians to keep their discoveries and proofs secrets by writing them in cipher, in obscure languages, or in private messages disposed in a sealed box with the Royal Society. Some scientists must have felt more comfortable with Latin precisely because its audience, though international, was socially restricted. Doctors claim the most keen to Latin as an inside language. A third reason why the writing of original science in English was delayed may have been to do with the linguistic inadequacy of English in the earlier modern period. English was not well equipped to deal with scientific arguments. First, it lacked the necessary technical vocabulary. Second, it lacked the grammatical resources required to represent the world in an objective and impersonal way, and to discuss the relations such as cause and effects that must hold between complex and hypothetical entities. Fortunately, several members of the Royal Society possessed an interest in language, and they became engaged in various linguistic projects. Although a proposal in 1674 to establish a committee for improving the English language came too little. The society's members did a great deal to foster the publication of science in English and to encourage the development of a suitable writing style. Many members of the Royal Society also published monographs in English. One of the first was by Robert Hooke, the Society's first creator of experiments, who described his experiments with microscopes in micrographia. In 1565, this work is largely narrative in style, based on transcripts of oral demonstration and lectures. In 1565, a new scientific journal, Philosophia Transactions, was inaccurate inaugurated. Perhaps the first international English language scientific journal is encouraged a new gen of scientific writing that offshores focused accounts of particular experiments. The 17th century was thus a formative period in the establishment of scientific English. In the following century, much of the momentum was lost as German established itself as the leading European language of science. It is estimated that by the end of the 18th century, 401 German scientific journals had been established as opposed to 96 in France and 50 in England. However, in the 19th century, scientific English again enjoyed a substantial lexical growth as the industrial revolution created the lead for new technical vocabulary and new specialized professional societies were instituted to promote and publish in the new disciplines. Education to be More was published last August. It was a report of the New Zealand government's early childhood care and education working group. The report argued for enhanced equality of access and better funding for childcare and earlier childhood education institutions. Unquestionably, that is a real need, but since parents don't globally send children to preschools until the age of 3 and are we missing out on the most important year of all? A 13-year study of early childhood development of Howard University has shown that by the age of 3, most children have the potential to understand about 1,000 words, most of the languages they will use in an ordinary conversation for the rest of their lives. Furthermore, research has shown that when earlier children is born with a natural causality, it can be suppressed dramatically during their second and third years of life. Researchers claim that the human personality is formed during their first 2 years of life, and during their first 3 years, children learn their basic skills they will use in all their later learning both at home and at school. Once over the age of 3, children continue to expand on existing knowledge of the world. It is generally acknowledged that young people from poor socio-economic backgrounds tend to do less well in our education system. Thus, observed not just in New Zealand, but also in Australia, Britain, and America, in an attempt to overcome the educational achievements. A nationwide program called Head Start was launched in the United States in 1965. A lot of money was poured into it. It took children into preschool institutions at the age of 3 and was supposed to help their children of poor families succeed in school. Despite substantial funding, results have been disappointing. It is thought that there are two explanations for this. First, the program began too late. Many children who entered it at the age of 3 were already behind their peers in language and memorable intelligence. Second, their parents were not involved. At the end of each day, a Head Start children returned to their same disadvantage in home environment. As a result of the growing research evidence of the importance of their first 3 years of a child's life and the disappointing results from Head Start, a pilot program was launched in Missouri in the U.S. that focused on parents as their children's first teachers. The Thorough programming was predicted. The own research showing that working with their family rather than bypassing their parents is their most effective way of helping children get off to their best possible start in life. Their 4 years pilot study included 380 families who were about to have their first child and who represented a cross-section of social economic status, age, and family configurations. They included single parents and two parents families, and families in which both parents worked, and the families with either their mother or father at home. The program involved trained parents educators visiting their parents' home and working with their parents and their child, information on child developments and guidance on things to look for and expect as their child goals were provided, plus guidance in fostering in their child's intellectual, language, social, and motor skill developments, and periodic checks-ups of their child educational and sensory developments, hearing, and vision were made to detect possible handicaps to interfere with growth and development. Medical problems were referred to professionals. Parents, educators made personal visits to homes, and monthly group meetings were held with other new parents to share experience and discuss topics of interest. Parents' resource centers located in school buildings offered learning materials for families and for facilitators. For child care, at the age of 3, the children who had been involved in the social programming was evaluated alongside across the section of child selected from the same range of socio-economic backgrounds and family situations, and also a random sample of children that age. The results were phenomenal. By the age of 3, the children in their programming were significantly more advanced in language development than their peers, had made greater strides in problem solving and other intellectual skills, and were further along in social development. In fact, their average child on their programming was performing at the level of their top 15 to 20% of their peers in such things as auditory comprehension, verbal ability, and language ability. Most important of all, the traditional measures of risk, such as parents, age, and education, or whether they were single parents and bore little or no relationship to their merits of achievements and language development. Children in their programming performed equally well regardless of socio-economic disadvantages. Child abuse were virtually eliminated, and the one factor that were found to affect the child's development were family stress, leading to a poor quality of parents-child interaction. That interaction was not necessarily bad in poor families. And these research findings are exactly this is growing evidence in New Zealand that children from poor social-economic backgrounds are arriving at school less well developed, and that our schools are tend to perpetuate that disadvantage. The initiative online and above could break that cycle of disadvantage. The concepts of working with parents in their homes as their place of work contrast quite markedly with the reports of elderly childhood care and education working group. Their focus is on getting children and mothers access to child care and institutionalized early childhood education. Education from the age of 3 to 5 is undoubtedly vital, as without a similar focus on parents' education and on the on the vital importance of their first 3 years, some evidence indicates that it will not be enough to overcome educational inequality. The fertile land of the Nile Delta is being eroded along Egypt's Mediterranean coast at an astounding rate. In some parts estimated at 100 meters per year, in the past, land scored away from the coastline by the currents of the Mediterranean Sea used to be replaced by sediments brought down to the delta by the river Nile. But this is no longer happening, and up to now, people have blamed to this north of delta land on the two large dams at Aswan in the south of Egypt, which hold back virtually all of the sediments that used to flow down the river. Before the dams were built, the Nile flowed freely, carrying huge quantities of sediments from Africa interior to be deposited on the Nile Delta. This continued for 7,000 years, eventually covering a region of over 22,000 square kilometers with layers of fertile silt. Annual flooding brought new nutrient-rich soil to the delta region, replacing what had been washed away by the sea and displacing it with the need for fertilizers in Egypt's richest food growing area. But when the Aswan dams were constructed in the 20th century to provide electricity and irrigation and to protect the large population center of Cairo and its surrounding areas from annual flooding and droughts, most of the sediments with this natural fertilizer accumulated up above the dam in the southern upstream half of the Lake Nasser, instead of passing down to the delta. Now, however, there turns out to be more to the story. It appears that the sediments of free water are emerging from the Aswan dams and picks up silt and sand as it erodes the river bed and the banks on the 800-kilometer trip to Cairo. Daniels Jane steadily of the Smithsonian Institute noticed that the water sample taken into Cairo just before the river entered the delta indicated that the river sometimes carried more than 850 grams of sediments per cubic meter of water, almost half of what is carried before the dams were built. I'm ashamed to say that the significance of this didn't strike me until after I had read 50 or 60 studies, says Stanley in Geology. There is still a lot of sediments coming into the delta, but virtually no sediments came out into the Mediterranean to replenish the coastline, so these sediments must be trapped on the delta itself. Once north of Cairo, most of the Nile water is diverted into more than 10,000 kilometers of irrigation canals, and only a small proportion reaches the sea directly through the rivers in the delta. The water in the irrigation canals is still very slow moving and thus cannot carry sediments. As Stanley explains, the sediments sinks to the bottom of the canals and then is added to fields by farmers pumped with their water into the 4 large freshwater lagoons that are located near the outer edges of the delta. So very little of this actually reaches the coastline to replace what is being washed away by the Mediterranean current. The farmers on the data planes and fishing and agriculture in the lagoons. It accounts for much of Egypt's food supply, but by the time the settlements has come to rest in their fields and their lagoons, it is laden in which municipal, industrial, and agricultural waste from the Cairo region, which is home to more than 40 million people. Pollutants are building upon faster and faster since steadily. Based on his investigations of sediments from the Delta lagoons, Frederick Sigel of George Washington University concurs in Lagoon. For example, the increase in mercury, lead, copper, and zinc coincide with the building of the high dam at the last one, and the availability of cheaper electricity and the development of major power-based industries. He says, since that time, and the concentration of mercury has increased significantly. The lead from engines that use lead fuels and from other natural sources has also increased dramatically. This poison can easily enter the food chain, affecting the productivity of fishing and farming. Another problem is that agricultural waste includes fertilizer, which stimulates increases in plants' growth in the lagoons and upsets the ecology of the area, with serious effects on the fishing industry. According to Sigel, international environmental organizations are beginning to pay closer attention to the region, in partly because of the problem of erosion and the polluting of the Nile Delta, but principally because they fear the impacts this situation will have on the whole Mediterranean and coastal ecosystem. But there are no easy solutions in the immediate future. Stanley believes that one solution would be to make artificial floods to flush out the delta waterways in the same way that nature floods did before the construction of the dams. It says, however, that is the long-term alternative process such as desalination may have to be used to increase the amounts of water available. In my view, Egypt must devise a way to have more water running through the river and the delta. As is Stanley, easier said than done in a desired region with a rapidly growing population. After years in the wilderness, the term artificial intelligence (AI) seemed poised to make a comeback. AI was big in the 1980s but vanished in the 1990s. It re-entered public consciousness with the release of AI, a movie about a robot boy. This has ignited public debates about AI, but the term is also being used once more within the computer industry. Researchers, executives, and marketing people are now using the expression without erring or inverted commas, and it is not always hype. The term is being applied with some justification to products that depend on technology that was originally developed by AI researchers. Admittedly, the rehabilitation of the term has a long way to go, and some firms still prefer to avoid using it. But the fact that others are starting to use it again suggests that AI has moved on from being seen as an over-ambitious and underachieving field of research. their field was launched, and the term artificial intelligence coined at their conference in 1956 by a group of researchers that include Marvin Minsky, John McCauley, Herbert Simon, and Alan Newell, all of whom went on to become leading figures in their field. Their direction provided an attractive but informative name for a research program that's encompassed such previously a disparate fields as operations research, cybernetics, logic, and computer science. The goal they shared was an attempt to capture or mimic human abilities using machines. That side, different groups of researchers attacked different problems, from speech recognition to cheese playing. In different ways, AI unified the field in name only, but it was a term that captured the public imagination. Most researchers agree that AI peaked around 1985, partly relied on science fiction movies and excited by the growing power of computers had high expectations. For years, AI researchers had implied that a breakthrough was just around the corner. Marvin Minsky said in 1967 that within a generation, the problem of creating artificial intelligence would have been substantially solved. Prototype medical diagnose programs and speech recognition software appeared to be making in progress. It proved to be a force down thinking computers and household robots failed to materialize, and backlash ensued. There was undue optimism in the early 1980s, says David Leake, a researcher at Indiana University. When people realized these were hard problems, there was retrenchment by the late 1980s. The term AI was being avoided by many researchers who opted instead to align themselves with special subdisciplines such as neural networks, agent technology, case-based reasoning, and so on. Ironically, in some ways, AI was a victim of its own success. Whenever an apparently mundane problem was solved, such as building a system that could implement an artificial unattended, the problem was deemed not to have been AI in the first place. If this works, it can't be AI, as Dr. Leake characteristics it. And the effects of repeatedly moving the goalpost in this way was that AI came to refer to a blue sky. Researchers that were still years away from commercialization, and researchers joked that AI stood for almost implemented. Meanwhile, the technologies that made it onto the market, such as speech recognition, language translation, and decision and support software, were no longer regarded as AI. Yes, all three ones feel well within the umbrella of AI research, but their tide may now been turned. According to Dr. Leake, HNC software of San Diego, backed by a government agency, writing that their new approach to artificial intelligence is the most powerful and promising approach ever discovered. HNC claimed that their system, based on a cluster of 30 processors, could be used to expose camouflage vehicles on a battlefield or extract a voice signal from a noisy background. Task humans can do well, but computers cannot. Whether or not their technology lives up to claims made for it, the fact that agencies are emphasizing the use of AI is itself an interesting development, says Dr. Leak. Another factor that may boost the prospects for AI in the near future is that investors are now looking for firms using clever technology rather than just a clever business model to differentiate themselves. In particular, the problem of information overload exacerbates by the growth of email and the explosion in the number of the web pages means there are plenty of opportunities for new technologies to help filter and categorize information. In classical AI problems, that may mean that more artificial intelligence companies will start to emerge to meet this challenge. The 1969 film 2001, A Space Odyssey, featured an intelligence computer called HAL 9000 as well as understanding and speaking English. HAL could play chess and even learn to live straight. HAL thus encapsulated the optimism of the 1960s that intelligence computers would be widespread by 2001, or 2001 has been and gone, and there is still no sign of HAL-like computer. Individual systems can play chess or transcribe a speech, but a general theory of machine intelligence still remains elusive. It may be, however, that the comparison with HAL no longer seems quite so important, and AI can now be judged by what it can do rather than by how well it matches up to a 30 years old science fiction film. People are being to realize that there are impressive things that this system can do, says Dr. Leak hopefully. The market for tourism in most areas is booming as never before. Countries all across the world are actively promoting their wilderness regions such as mountains, Arctic lands, deserts, small islands, and wetlands due high spending tourism. The attraction of these areas is obvious. By definition, wilderness tourism requires little or no initial investment, but that does not mean that there is no cost. At the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development recognized these regions are fragile, highly vulnerable to abnormal pressures, not just in terms of their ecology, but also in terms of their culture of their inhabitants. The three most significant types of fragile environment in this respect, and also in terms of the proportion of the Earth's surface they cover, and deserts, mountains, and Arctic areas. Important characteristics is their marked seasonality with harsh conditions prevailing for many months each year. Consequently, most human activities, including tourism, are linked to quite clearly defined parts of the year. Tourists are drawn to these regions by their natural landscape, beauty, and the unique cultures of their indigenous people, and poor governments in these isolated areas have welcomed the new breed of adventure tourists, grateful for the hard currency they bring. And for several years now, tourism has been the prime source of foreign exchange in Nepal and Bhutan. And tourism is also a key element in the economics of Arctic zones such as Lapland and Alaska, and in desert areas such as areas rock in Australia and Arizona's Monument Valley. Once a location is established as a main tourism destination, the effects on the local community are profound. Where here, farmers, for example, can make more money in a few weeks working at porters for foreign tacos than they can in a year working in their fields. It is not surprising that many of them give up their farm work, which is thus left the other members of the family. In some hill regions, this has led to a serious decline in farm outputs and a change in the local debt. Because there is insufficient labor to maintain terraces and irrigation systems and tend to crops. The result has been that many people in these regions have to outside supplies for rice and other foods. In Arctic and desert societies, year-round survival has traditionally depended on hunting animals and fish and collecting fruits over a relatively short season. However, as some inhabitants become involved in tourism, they no longer have time to collect wild food. This has led to increasing dependency on both food and storage and stores. Tourism is not always the culprit behind such changes. In all kinds of which neighbor or governments handouts tend to undermine traditional survival systems. Whatever the cause, the dilemma is always the same. What happens if this new external source of income drop? The fiscal impacts of visitors is another serious problem associated with the growth in adventure tourism. Much attention has focused on erosion along major trails, but perhaps more importantly are the deforestation and the impacts on water supplies arising from the need to provide tourists with cooked food and hot showers. In both mountains and deserts, slow-growing trees are often the main source of fuel, and water supplies may be limited or vulnerable to degradation. And through heavy use, stories about the problems of tourism have become legion in the last few years. Yes, it does not have to be a problem. Also, tourism inevitably affects the region in which it takes place. The cost to this fragile environment and the local cultures can be minimized. Indeed, it can even be a vehicle for reinvigorating local cultures, as has happened with the shale fields of Lapo Valley and in some alpine villages, and a growing number of adventure tourism operators are trying to ensure that their activities benefit the local population and the environment over the long term. In the Swiss Alps communities have decided that their future depends on integrating tourism more effectively with the local economy. A local concern about the rising number of second-home developments in the Swiss Alps resulted in limits being imposed on their growth. And there has also been a renaissance in communal cheese production in their area, providing the locals with a reliable source of income that does not depend on outside visitors. Many of the Arctic tourist destinations have been exploited by outside companies who employ transient workers and replicate most of their profit to their home base, but some Arctic communities are now operating tour businesses themselves, thereby ensuring that their benefits are good. Luckily, for instance, a native corporation in Alaska employing local people is running an air tour from Anchorage to where tourists eat Arctic food, walk on the tundra, and watch local musicians and dancers. Native people in the desert regions of the American and Southwest have followed a similar strategies, encouraging tourists to visit their pupils and reservations to purchase highly quality handicrafts and artwork. The Acma and some Possible have established highly profitable poultry businesses, where the Navajo and Hopo groups have been similarly successful with jewelry. Too many people living in fragile environments have lost control over their economics, their culture, and their environment. So, when tourism has penetrated their homelands, merely restricting tourism cannot be the solution to the imbalance, because people's desire to see new place will not just disappear. Instead, communities in fragile environments must achieve greater control over tourism ventures in their regions in order to balance their needs and aspirations with the demands of tourism. A growing number of communities are demonstrating that with the firm communal decision making, this is possible. The critical question now is whether this can become their normal rather than their exceptions. On 2nd August 1999, a particular holiday in the town of Sierra in the UK, a large panel of toughened glass in the roof of their shopping center as vessels were shattered without warning and fell from its frame. When fragments were analyzed by experts at the Giant, a glass manufacturer, began, which had made their panel and they found that many crystals of nickel sulfide trapped inside their glass and had almost certainly caused their failure. The glass industry is aware of the issue, as its Spring Warden and chairman of the standardized committee at the Glass and Glacier Federation, a British trade association, and the standards development official as significant, but the insights that cases are few and far between. It is a very rare phenomenon, he says. Others disagree. On average, I see about 1 or 2 buildings a month suffering from nickel sulfide related failures. Cesar Barry Josso, a consultant engineer involved in the basic work investigation. Other experts tell our similar experience. Tolly William, a London-based consulting engineers, Sandberg and Simon Armstrong at Caltech associates in Hampshire about they knew of hundreds of cases. What you hear is only the tip of the iceberg. Says Terraford, a glass expert at Resolve engineer in Brisbane, in Queensland. He believes that the reason is simple. No one wants bad price. Toughened glass is found everywhere, from cars and bus shuttles to the windows, wheels, and the roofs of thousands of buildings around the world. it is easy to say why this glass has 5 minutes, 5 times the strength of standard glass, and when it does break, it shatters into tiny cubes rather than large, razor sharp, shaped architects love it because large panels can be bolted together to make transparent walls and turn it into ceilings and floors is almost as easy. It is made by heating sheets of ordinary glass to about 620 degrees Celsius to soften it slightly, allowing its structure to expand, and then cooling it rapidly with jets of cold air. This causes the outer layer of the pan to contract and solidify before the interior. When the interior finally solidifies and shrinking, it exerts a pull on the outer layer that leaves its impermanent compression and produces this tensile force inside of the glass as cracks propagate. Best in materials under tension, the compressive force on their surface must be overcome before the panel will break, making it more resistant to cracking. In the problem starts when glass contains nickel sulfide impurities. Trackable amounts of nickel and sulfur are usually present in the raw materials used to make glass, and nickel can also be introduced by fragments or nickel alloys falling into the molten glass. The glass is heated. These atoms react to form tiny crystals of nickel sulfide. Just a tenth of a gram of nickel in the furnace can create up to 50,000 crystals. These crystals can exist in two forms: a dense form called the alpha phase, which is stable at high temperatures, and a less dense form called the beta phase, which is stable at room temperatures. The high temperatures used in the toughing process convert all the crystals to the dense complex alpha form, but the subsequent cooling is so rapid that the crystals don't have time to change back to their beta phase. This leaves unstable alpha crystals in the glass, print like a coiled spring, ready to revert to the beta phase without warning. And when this happens, the crystals expand by up to 4%, and if they were within the crystal with the center tensile region of the pan, and the stresses of this unleashed can shatter the whole sheet. The time that elapses before failure occurs is unpredictable. It could happen in just a month after manufacture or decades later. Also, if the glass is heated by sunlight, so for example, the process is speed up. Ironically, this graphene of consolidating engineers invented the hottest pan and the graphene glass known to have failed due to nickel sulfide inclusion into what implemented glass reaching a building in London, Lancaster. The pan was 27 years old. This Data showing the scale of the leukocyte problem is almost impossible to find. The picture is made more complicated by the fact that these crystals occur in batches. So even if on average there is only one inclusion in 7 tons of glass, if you experience one nickel sulfide failure in your buildings, that probably means you have caused a problem in more than one pan. And Joseph says that in the last decade, he has worked on over 15 buildings with the number of failures into double figures. One of the worst example of this waterfront place, which was completed in 1990. Of the following decades, the 40-story Brisbane block suffered a rush of failures. 80 pans always toughened glass shattered due to inclusions before experts were finally calling John Barry, an expert in nickel sulfide contamination at the University of Queensland, analyzed every glass pan in the building using a stereo camera. A photographer went up in the corridor to take photos of every panel. These were scanned under a modified microfiche reader for signs of nickel sulfide crystals. We discovered at least another 120 pans with potentially dangerous inclusions, which were then replaced. Says Barry, it was a very expensive and time-consuming process that took around 6 months to complete. Though the projects cost 1.6 million, nearly 700,000 pounds, and that's alternative recollecting in the entire building. It would have cost 10 times as much. That is important to organisms for 2 different reasons. Firstly, it is used as a cue for the timing of daily and seasonal rhythms in both plants and animals, and secondly, it is used to assess the growth in plants. Breeding in most organisms occur during a part of the year only, and so a reliable cue is needed to trigger breeding behavior. Day length is an excellent cue because it provides a perfectly predictable pattern in every change within the year. In the temperate zone, in some temperatures fluctuate greatly from day to day, but day length increases steadily by a predictable amount. The seasonal impacts of day length on physiological response is called photoperiodism, and the amount of experimental evidence for this phenomenon is considerable. For example, some species of birds breeding can be included even in midwinter, simply by increasing day length artificially. Often 1964. Other examples of photoperiodism occur in plants. Shortly, a plant's flowers when their day is less than a certain critical length. Non-day plants flowers after a certain critical day length is exceeded. In both cases, the critical day length differs from species to species. Plants which with flower after a period of vegetative growth, regardless of for the period, are known as day-nature plants. Breeding seasons in animals, such as birds, have evolved to occupy the part of the year in which offspring have the greatest chances of survival before the breeding season begins, and for the reserves it must be built up to support the energy cost of reproduction and to provide for young birds both when they are in the nest and after fledging. In thus, many temperate zone birds use the increasing day length in spring as a cue to begin to begin their nesting cycle because this is a point when adequate food resources will be assured. The adaptive significance of photoperiodism in plants is also clear, so the plants that flower in spring in their temperate zone are adapted to maximizing in seasoning and growth during the growth season. Long-day plants are adapted for situations that require fertilization and by insects, or a long period of seed repenning. Short-day plants that flower in the autumn in the temperate zone are able to build up food reserves over the growing season and over winter at the seeds. The later plants have an evolutionary advantage when the connection between the favorable period for reproduction and the day length is much less certain. In, for example, desert animals germinate, flower, and seed whenever suitable rainfall occurs, regardless of the day length. The breeding season of some plants can be delayed to extraordinary length. Bamboos are perennial grasses that remains in a vegetative state for many years and then suddenly in flower, fruits, and die. In 1976, every bamboo of the species on the island of Jamaica flowered seed and died during 1988. In 1884, the next generation of bamboo flowered and died between 1916 and 1918, which suggests a vegetative cycle of about 31 years. The climatic triggers for this flowering cycle is not yet known, but the adaptive significance is clear. The simultaneous production of masses of bamboo seeds, in some cases 12 to 15 centimeters deep on the ground, is more than other seed-eating animals can cope with at the time, so that some seeds escape being eaten and grow up to from the next generation. And the second reason that is important to organism is that it is essential for photosynthesis. And this is the process by which plants use energy from the sun to convert carbon and from soil or water into organic material for growth. The rate of photosynthesis in a plant can be measured by calculating the rate of its uptake of carbon, and there is a wide range of photosynthetic responses are plants to variations in mass intensity. Some plants reach maximum photosynthesis at 1/4 for sunlight, and others, like sugarcane, never reach a maximum and must continue to increase the photosynthesis rates as light intensity rise. Plants in general can be divided into two groups: shade-tolerant species and shade-intolerant species. This classification is commonly used in forestry and horticulture. Shade-tolerant plants have lower photosynthetic rates and hence have lower growth rates than those of shade-intolerant species. Plant species become adaptive to live in a certain kind of habitat, and in the process evolve a series of characteristics that prevent them from occupying in other habitats. Green suggests that light may be one of the major components directing in this adaptation. For example, eastern hemlock seedlings are shade-tolerant. They can survive in the forest understory under very low light levels because they have a low photosynthetic rate.